Challenges designed to test gamers outside of their ability to just simply complete the game have existed in gaming for a very long time. And yes, I'm talking about long before the advent of achievements and trophies where the completion of such deeds became public knowledge. Before that, it was all about personal satisfaction and bragging rights amongst a close group of friends. Within the Final Fantasy franchise specifically, you could actually date this back to the original game, as some classify Warmech as the first super boss. This particular enemy had a 5% chance of spawning as a random enemy in the Flying Fortress, and it was extremely powerful, especially if you weren't actually expecting to face it. Defeating it was therefore something of a feat, and as the franchise grew and grew, such challenges became much more commonplace. Whether these challenges came in the form of acquiring different ultimate weapons and armor, or simply just defeating tough enemies like Emerald Weapon, Omega Weapon, Ozma and Penance, doing so was a real accomplishment. But now there's a record of such accomplishments, and through the wonderful beauty of statistics, we can see which feats are actually the most difficult to complete across the Final Fantasy franchise. Well, when it comes to those that actually have trophy support. It means, for example, we can settle debates about which is less common, acquiring the Venus Sigil or the Sun Sigil. Spoiler, it's the Venus Sigil. Yep, we didn't actually put it in our last video about the hardest weapons to acquire, but less than half the people who did that Chocobo race to get the Sun Sigil have successfully dodged 200 lightning strikes. And did you know that gamers are more likely to 100% the story of Final Fantasy X-2 than use the Lady Luck's bribe ability 30 times? It's fascinating, right? So, for the purposes of this video, we're going to be delving into those rarest trophies, those ones that only a small percentage of players have had the time and dedication to obtain. But to make things fair, we're going to limit this to one trophy per game, as some games have plenty of rather devilish ones, while others have one or two. We will though be including spin-offs and sequels. The only stipulation on the game is that it has to be a Final Fantasy game and it has to have trophy support. So anyway, with those disclaimers out of the way, my name is of course Daryl, and these are, according to Sony's official statistics as provided by the filter on PSN profiles, the 7 ultra rarest trophies that most people struggle to unlock. Starting with number 1, the Scrivener Trophy in Final Fantasy XII, the Zodiac Age. Those who have played the original version of Final Fantasy XII will fondly remember the Sky Pirate's Den. By adding sprites into the den, it acted as a record of the various accomplishments that had been achieved while playing the game, such as raising your party's average level above 50 or defeating certain marks. It was a great feature, and it was actually removed for the launch of the Zodiac Age because they had trophy support, but due to backlash from the community, it was then put back into the game with patch 1.04. Anyway, my point with this story is that even before the advent of trophies, Final Fantasy XII still had a system whereby you could track which feats you had accomplished. One such feat, called Scrivener, rewards you with the Bagamnam sprite, and it's awarded for completing the bestiary in the Clan Primer. You only have to defeat every enemy in the game once, but even with the new challenges added into the Zodiac Age, such as the Trial Mode, Scrivener is still the most difficult objective to complete within Final Fantasy XII. Just. Only 3% of players have completed Trial Mode. Yep, they've squared off against the Judge Magisters and won. But only 2.7% of players have managed to complete the Bestiary. With reported sales of over 1 million copies, that still means that there are a good 27,000 of you out there who have achieved this feat, but that still makes it rather rare in my book. Next on our list is the Perfect Sphere Master Trophy in Final Fantasy X. When Final Fantasy X released in Japan and North America, although it did feature quests to gain the ultimate weapons, it didn't feature much in the form of endgame enemies. This particular deficiency was fixed for the international version, which was released in Europe the following year, as developers added in the Dark Aeons and Penance, incredibly hard bosses that would really test players to their limits. They would also force them to not only obtain better weapons and accessories, but also delve further into the game's character development mechanic, the Sphere Grid. The Sphere Grid acted as a big departure from the leveling systems of old, as instead of leveling up in the traditional sense, you would now gain sphere levels. These would then be used to navigate around the Sphere Grid, and you could then purchase nodes on the way, which would boost your character's attributes. There were empty nodes too though, and on a typical playthrough you would get nowhere near purchasing all of the available spheres, let alone going back to fill in the empty nodes. And what makes the perfect Sphere Master Trophy so tricky is that you have to fill every single node on every single character. This feat has only been achieved by 2.4% of players who have played Final Fantasy X HD, and for reference, more people have beaten Penance than have maxed out the sphere grid on every character. Granted, yes, you can be cheap and beat the Dark Aeons and Penance using your Jimbo, but even still, it's not that easy, and it just goes to show that gaining the perfect Sphere Master Trophy requires a serious commitment to the game. Third on our list is the Treasure Hunter Trophy in Final Fantasy XIII, which was actually the first game in the franchise to offer trophy support. And even though trophies had only been around for a little while when Final Fantasy XIII released, the trophies contained within ended up being a pretty good mix. There were of course the classic trophies related to story progression, others such as Limit Breaker that were assigned to individual feats, and then there were the endgame trophies that were a bit of a brat. First off, there was the Galif's Grail Trophy, which was associated to beating all of the Seath Stones. And then there was the Seath Paragon Trophy, which was awarded for beating each of these Seath Stones with a 5-star rating. But neither of these compared to the Treasure Hunter Trophy, which was awarded for obtaining every single weapon and every single accessory that features in the game. For reference, there are 102 weapons and 119 accessories, and you can only obtain them by becoming rather intimate with the game's upgrading system. Just make sure you never sell anything unless you are absolutely sure you need to do so to progress, as selling certain accessories can make it impossible to obtain this trophy. Currently, only 2.2% of Final Fantasy XIII players have unlocked this trophy, which given the game sales is still a pretty decent chunk of people. But if you're one of the few who have unlocked this trophy, make sure you give yourself a nice congratulations because your patience and dedication are very much commendable. Our fourth trophy is Sweet Dreams from A King's Tale Final Fantasy XV. If you can transport yourselves all the way back to E3 2016, you should remember that A King's Tale Final Fantasy XV was announced as a pre-order bonus when you ordered the game through selected retailers. And that's how it remained for a period of time until Square Enix decided to make the game free to play for everyone a little over 4 months after Final Fantasy XV released. It was meant to be a promotional tool for the game, but A King's Tale was actually pretty decent in its own right. It acted as a side-scrolling beat-em-up where King Regis was the main character alongside his chums Wescom, Claris and Cid, and although the story included wasn't canon, it was still useful for developing the relationship between Noctis and his father. Now, the game itself wasn't that taxing in my opinion, but still, the fact that only 17.5% of people who played the game actually ended up beating it does suggest otherwise. Either that or they just didn't think it was actually worth finishing. Nonetheless, beyond just finishing the game, the trophies were actually rather tough, mainly because of the dream battles. These unlocked once you finished the main game, and they acted as scenario conflicts. The hardest trophy to obtain, which is a feat only achieved by 1.3% of players, is to complete not just all of the dream battles, but also complete the special challenges offered up in each of the individual battles. Some of these involve finishing the battle without taking any damage or without using certain magics, but there are some rather unique ones thrown in too, and if you're going after this, all I'll say is good luck. Fifth, we have the Let It Hate Flow trophy from Dissidia NT. When Dissidia NT launched earlier this year, it was met with a rather mixed reception from the fanbase, and this also extended through to the game's trophy list, which had some rather tricky trophies to unlock. As Dissidia NT primarily focused around online play, a decent chunk of the game's trophies are of course focused on this particular area, and because of this it means you're actively vying with other real people to try and obtain trophies. Indeed, this is of course part of the enjoyment of playing online games, but there was one type of trophy that was templated across all of the characters that requires a very high level of skill to actually acquire it. You have to achieve a grade of A++ in 3 ranked matches with any particular character. This is no easy feat, and it requires a lot of skill, patience and good fortune, as you need to obtain a score of at least 1,900 points by the end of the match. I say it requires skill, patience and fortune because obviously, while your own performance is a very big driver here, what you can't fully control is how well everyone else performs in the match. One interesting thing about this trophy is that because the online has been struggling a little bit due to a lack of players, sometimes AI will actually be inserted into the online matches to make sure there are 6 players, and they often are much worse than real players. Some clever bots over at PSN Profiles have therefore figured out that you can con the game into matching you with AI on purpose, which, while a time-consuming method, should make obtaining this trophy just a little bit easier. Needless to say, even with this, it's still tough, and statistically, Golbez is the hardest character to do this with, as only 1.3% of players have achieved this feat. Well, it's either that or he's just the least popular character. Our penultimate trophy is Bloodlust in Final Fantasy IX. There's nothing quite like booting up one of those classic PlayStation experiences on a newer PlayStation system and checking out all the new trophies the developers have inserted into the game, only to find that some of them are just so much more cruel than you could ever have imagined. Well, that's pretty much what they did with Final Fantasy IX when they released it on the PlayStation 3 back in 2010. There are, of course, the classic trophies you'd expect for doing things like completing the game, defeating optional bosses like Ozma, and reaching level 99 with your characters, but there's also some really devilish ones that they just put in there to push players even further. The rarest is a trophy called Bloodlust, which has only been obtained by 1.1% of players, and to obtain this, you have to defeat 10,000 enemies throughout the course of your playthrough. This might not seem like too many on face value, but when you start comparing that to some of the other trophies in the game and how many people have completed them, it may change your perspective. People are more than twice as likely to obtain Excalibur 2 than defeat 10,000 enemies, and they are also more likely to have obtained Hail the King, which requires you to jump the jump rope 1,000 times without messing up. It's recommended that if you are going for the Bloodlust trophy, that you head to Gizmaluke's Grotto or the Forgotten Continent, as you have very high chances of facing multiple enemies in a single battle. And if you plan properly, it's estimated that this trophy may take around 10 hours of pure grind, and that's even after you've finished the game naturally. Lastly, we have the Pursuit of Knowledge trophy in Final Fantasy XV Royal Edition. Now, I have absolutely no idea how many people actually picked up Final Fantasy XV Royal Edition or indeed purchased the DLC, but as far as I can tell, the rarest Final Fantasy trophy available right now resides within this piece of DLC. Alongside a whole host of other additional content, the Royal Edition added in the data log, a feature that records notes that are found during your playthrough of the base game. Some of these notes were already in the game before the Royal Edition, and you may remember them in the form of cosmology, chronicles, letters, and research materials. But they've since added in the almanacs, monoliths, and the Omega files, which help to add more backstory around some of the new content that's been added into the game. There are a total of 94 datalog entries to find, but to unlock this trophy you only need to obtain 76 of them. Just be very careful though, as there are some stipulations around how they can be obtained and there are some missable datalog entries. Your best bet is to really seek out the guides that are available on places like PlayStation Trophies. And even with those guides, only 0.1% of players have actually accomplished this feat. So if you do manage to get all 76 datalog entries, you can place yourself in a rather exclusive bunch of players. And with that, my list has come to a conclusion. So yeah, they were 7 ultra rare trophies that most players struggle to unlock. Are you surprised by just how few people have achieved some of these objectives and how many have finished others? As always, let us know in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Also, if you'd like to think about joining our growing community, then be sure to check out our Discord server. There's a link in the description below. And why not consider supporting us on Patreon? You get the satisfaction of knowing that you're helping to support us in the creation of these videos, and you will be rewarded by, amongst other things, getting your name put at the end of videos like these guys you're seeing right now. Alright guys, this is Daryl signing out. I will see you next time for more Final Fantasy videos.